Yeah. How are you doing, man?
I'm great. It's great to be here. Finally, I've been thinking about this all week, but yes, I'm great. It's great to be here. Let me adjust this thing so it's not moving.
All right, man. So thank you so much for joining this talks, and it's a really big pleasure to have the legend of Graham Haynes in here, man. Yeah.
Oh, meu prazer muito.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Are you set up?
Tribus.
Yeah, what's up,
Yeah.
Mike?
Hey, Mike, what's up? VJ.
VJ.
Jelani. Wow, okay.
Oh, wow.
So I guess all those things I sent out, people saw them. I sent a lot of shares on Facebook, on Instagram. So cool.
That's great, man. So yeah,
That's great.
Again, thank you so much for being here. It's gonna be a great talk. I love that you accepted to do that. And well, I know we have talked a couple of times before, and I know you have a lot of experience with conducted improvisation, and I'm very excited to hear what you have to say about that. So maybe you could start talking about your experience, your life experience with that.
With conducted improvisation.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll start first a little bit. A lot of these people, they know me. I see there's a lot of my friends here, colleagues, friends. I grew up in a musical family. My father, Roy Haynes, one of the greatest drummers that ever picked up a pair of drumsticks, as far as me and many people are concerned. So I grew up in a jazz. Okay, I'm a jazz kid, Coltrane, Dolphy, McCoy. Those guys were coming to my house to rehearse with my dad, or pick him up, or go to a gig or something. My father was going to play with Monk or Sarah Vaughan or whoever. I grew up. That's how I grew up. I started playing trumpet, then I started playing cornet, and then I was a cornet player. That's what I do. That's what I do primarily as a living. I'm a cornet player. I'm a composer, and I'm a cornet player. So conducted improvisation. So the first time I remember seeing anything that was conducted improvisation was probably Sun Ra. I saw Sun Ra Orchestra when I was pretty young. And I saw him do these things, these gestures, these he had all kinds of very dramatic kind of gestures. And of course he had these long robes with a hat. He was very kind of cosmic, dramatic character, when he would do his conduction, it would be very dramatic. Then, James Brown, James Brown was conducting, James Brown was conducting. Then I would say Miles Davis. I saw Miles Davis live in 1974 at the Jazz Workshop. And he was conducting. It was improvised. I mean, it was groove. And he would cut the band off and then bring somebody in to play while the band was out, and then bring the band back in. And that was conduction. That was conducted improvisation. Okay, so Butch Morris. I first heard the name Butch Morris, I guess, I was probably in 1982 or 3 or something. Butch Morris was conducting David Murray's big band at Sweet Basil. And that was around the time I first heard about him. And the first time I got to work with Butch was with, so David Murray, Butch Morris was hired to write a score for a TV pilot called, this TV pilot was called A Man Named Hawk. Butch Morris was hired to do the score. And David Murray, I think, called me. David said, look, we're going to do this thing, and Butch Morris is going to do this thing. We're going to go into the studio. So we went into the studio, and Butch very quickly showed all of us what he was going to do. He showed us, and we did it, you know. And it was fascinating to me. But then I would see Butch around a lot, you know, just on the street or in the clubs. You know, we were all hanging out at clubs and Sweet Basil, Vanguard clubs, you know, different clubs around the East Side, West Side. And then Butch, I'm trying to remember how, but Butch and I started hanging out because Butch and I had a passion for for cigars and whiskey.
Okay.
So we would hang out, and we would go, in those days in New York, you had these cigar bars, you know. So Butch and I, you know, he would buy cigars or I would buy cigars, and we would go and hang out, and we would smoke and drink and talk about music and stuff. The thing was, we were both cornet players, so we had that in common. So, but that he was checking out things I was checking him out, and we was just hanging out. And I wasn't working when this went on for a period of so many years. Butch and I were friends. We were hanging out with the same people and all this stuff. I was going to see him play. I was going to see him conduct. But I didn't play with him for a long time after the David Murray thing. No. Okay, so David Murray did 2 recordings with his big band. And I was in those orchestras that David put together and Butch conducted. But this was a situation where there was music that David wrote, and Butch was kind of opening it up. And that was the first time that I said, man, I want to write some shit and have Butch deconstruct it. So that was my plan, and I kept telling Butch, I said, man, I'm gonna write some stuff I want you to. He said, okay, right. And this went on for years. I didn't write anything, and I didn't give it to him. But then I started working with Butch. I remember Butch put together a large ensemble. I was in it. A bunch of us were in it. And then from there, I did a series of conductions with him. Then there was the New Blue Orchestra. So when the New Blue Orchestra was formed, I was in it. Ilhan, a bunch of us, Brandon Ross. I mean, there were a lot of different people who came in and out of New Blue Orchestra, but there were certain core people: Brandon, Ilhan, me, Jonathan Hafner, Kenny Wollison. We were kind of the core of New Blue Orchestra, and that didn't change even till now, pretty much. So Butch, we had residency at New Blue. We played every Monday night for a series of years. We went on the road. We did a recording in the studio. And so this was kind of like a working band for Butch. And that was it. You know, the thing for me was this. I was so intrigued with Butch and what he was doing that I made it a point. You know, a lot of times we played, there was one person in the audience. There were 2 people in the audience. There was very small audiences a lot of time, you know. And none of us were making any money. But I made a point. I said, anytime Butch wants me to play, I'm gonna be there. Because I wanted to learn the conduction. And as far as I was concerned, the best way to learn it was to play in a conduction. So I played in as many conductions as was possible for a period of years, up until Butch died. And then after that, okay, so Butch passed. When he passed, the New Blue Orchestra continued. They did a series of tributes to him, and then after that, we just continued doing gigs. So Kenny Wollison would conduct, I would conduct, and Brandon Ross would conduct. And this is how we would do it. It just spontaneously came like this. I would come, I would bring a baton, and I would conduct for a while. Then I would put the baton down and go and play cornet. Then Kenny would come and he would pick up the baton, and then he would conduct for a while. Then he would go and then he would go play drums, and then Brandon would come. And between our conductions, sometimes there was space, and we leave a gap and let a groove go by, or let some ideas go by, and then the next conductor would come. So that's how I started conducting. That was my first experience actually conducting.
No, man, that's super interesting. It's a crazy history, and it's a privilege that you've worked so close with Butch, and you learned so much things from him, and also from everybody who wasn't in those orchestras that he played.
Right.
And
also, in addition to that, I should say that I also worked with Adam Rudolph and Go Organic Orchestra, and I also worked with Carl Berger and orchestras that he had put together. So after a point, what happened was I learned conduction from Butch, but then I was working with Adam, and then I was learning his system. And then I was working with Carl, and I learned his system. And after a while, I started just taking ideas, from each one of them, and developing. You know, Adam's thing is different from Butch's thing. He's working a lot with rhythms, polyrhythms, and rhythms, cross rhythms, and he's working with a certain kind of cycle of melodic information that he calls matrices. Matrices, like a matrix is almost like a serial. It's almost like serial music. It's like a tone rolls and things. And he's working with that. So he's doing his form of conducted improvisation. He's using those rhythms and those things. And then it was Carl. Carl a lot of times would start playing notated piece, and then he'd do a conduction, and he'd go back to a notated piece or whatever. It was open, whatever was in the moment. So, you know.
Yeah, man, and it's incredible that you have this opportunity to gather different knowledge from different people about this subject. And I wonder how did this influence your own way of doing your conductions, your conducting? I mean, how did you put all those pieces together?
Well, I would have to say primarily I'm influenced by Butch as a conductor. I use his system. I'm now using his book. So, but with Adam, I was really intrigued with the rhythms and the matrices. So, but I haven't used them. I did use them a couple of times in some workshops. You know, I've done some workshops where I've used his ideas, his melodic and rhythmic ideas in a conduction. But for the most part, I would say the conduction that I do is coming directly from Butch. Now, a couple of years ago, Vijay had invited me up to Banff, and I asked him if I could do a conduction. He said, well, you know, Tyshawn Sori is doing conduction. So in the end, what happened was Tyshawn and I did a conduction together with the students. It was a large ensemble. It was over 20 musicians. And I started the conduction and conducted for half. And then I went to my cornet with electronics. And then, so when I conducted, Tyshawn was playing in the percussion. And then I conducted. When I was done, I put down a baton, went to my cornet, which I had electronics, and then Tyshawn conducted. And see, I learned a lot of things from Tyshawn. Tyshawn has brought in, because we both worked with Butch at the same time. We have some ensembles when Matt Laval was talking about his experience working with Butch, and he said I was invited. So yeah, there was a period of time. There was a situation when Butch was working at Bowery Ballroom. He had a residency at Bowery Ballroom, and that was around the time his brother died. And he had written a piece for his brother. it's his brother's name, Wilbur Morris. And I remember he wrote a piece for Wilbur, and he said, I want you to be the solo voice. So they played the piece, and Butch would just point to me when he wanted me to play, and then he would take me out and then bring the orchestra. But yeah, I remember during that period, there was at one point when Tyshawn was playing with the orchestra. So Tyshawn learned conduction, but he's been introducing some other things into it. So when we did this thing at Banff, I was like, wow, this is really cool. You know, he's using some things I haven't seen. So now I'm gonna pick his brain. I don't know if he's on, but you know, Tyshawn and I are talking about doing some projects together in the studio, and whenever I can get a commitment from the record company that I'm talking to, then we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it. He's gonna conduct. I'm gonna write some sketches and some ideas. He's gonna conduct, and I'm gonna be the soloist. And so yeah, I'm waiting for the green light on that. You know.
Yeah, man. Tyshawn is a great musician. I follow his works, and I've seen he doing the conduction in the Banff Center as well. And well, about you, I mean, some time ago you sent me this footage of you doing the conduction in the Banff Center. And
yeah, that was it. That was the concert I was just talking. That was it.
Yeah, man. And
you know,
what? Please go.
No, follow.
No, please come on.
No. That was you know. So here's the thing. I haven't been doing conduction as a conductor for that long. I haven't. My experience as a conductor really is Blue Orchestra. We've done a certain amount of concerts. I've been doing some workshops with some, you know, a couple of universities. I did a couple of master classes, a couple of things here and there. And then I did that thing at Banff. But I wouldn't say, you know, there are, as a conductor, doing real time, doing conduction experience-wise, I don't have that much experience. I have a lot of experience playing in the conduction. But I don't have a lot of experiences as a conductor. I wish I had more, and hopefully, you know, you and I are talking about stuff. But, you know, my whole thing is that the best way to do something is to do it. You know, the best way to do conducted improvisation is by doing conducted improvisation in front of an audience. In front of an audience. Because, see, the audience brings a whole other aspect to any kind of improvised music. You know, you can take 6 guys in a room with no conductor, and if they improvise to an empty audience, it's going to be different than if they improvise to 30 people. If they improvise in front of 50, 100, 200, 3,000 people, it's going to be different. You know, so my whole thing is to work ideas, work things out in front of an audience if you can do it. I mean, rehearsal is very important. I can't overemphasize rehearsal, but live performance is really the key for all of us. Yeah, man. Yeah, I totally agree. I was really intrigued when some of the other people you interviewed, they said they were conducting the audience and they were bringing it. That's a whole thing too. I mean, you know, that's the whole, you know, and playing with the space and doing all kinds of things. I mean, you know, Butch once did a conduction at the Knitting Factory. I remember where it was a virtual conduction. So he was in one place and there was some people somewhere else, and he was conducting them with a camera. and it was a lag, you know. It was, you know, it was crazy. But I mean, yeah, there's all kinds of things you can do with musicians being in a different place, or the audience, or the musicians with the audience. You can have, you know, once Adam Rudolph did a Go Organic Orchestra where the orchestra sat inside of the audience, and then and that's an interesting thing too. And I've always been intrigued with this whole thing of having the orchestra or having any group play inside of the audience, because the whole construct of being on the stage and then the audience being over there, to me, that's a little, it's a little, well, it's dated for one thing. You know? It's dated, but it's also not really creative enough for me, you know. Why not have the audience with the musicians? Why not have the audience on the stage, or have the musicians in the audience? Or why don't people construct performance spaces so it can be more integrated? I know some people are doing that now, you know. But,
yeah, I love these ideas, and well, it still on that footage that you sent me of you doing the conduction in the Banff Center, that there was something that caught my attention, and it was that in specifically that footage, I've perceived that you used a lot of free, let me call it like that, but free gestures. I mean, gestures with no predetermined directive, like just waving your arms and playing with dynamics, manipulating, you know, this sonic environment, but not really using a lot of, you know, metaphors or something like that. And that was something that I really liked it. I appreciate when I see people doing, you know, kind of a free movement, free conducting, and I would think, if I would like to know if that was intentional or not.
well, for the most part, from what I remember, everything that I did was part of the conduction lexicon.
Yeah.
I don't recall doing anything that was not in the and you know, I don't have any gestures that are not in the lexicon. I mean, I'm working pretty much directly with the book, but I don't know, maybe it was how you saw it or how I did it, or I don't know, but my whole thing is that I'm really I'm interested in several things. I'm interested in a lot of the things that a lot of people that conduct. But I will say this, I'm also very much, because I've performed so much with so many people in so many different contexts, with music, without music, I'm very, I try to be very clear, because I've been on the other side. You know, for me, one of the main things about conducted improvisation is clarity. You know, things have to be clear. Whatever you do, whatever your gesture is, it has to be clear. And it has to be the musicians have to know what you're doing in advance. You can't bring anything new to the music. Because see, the other thing is that musicians, even great musicians, great improvisers, they get in front of an audience, sometimes they get a little fearful, you know. Musicians get fearful in front of an audience when when you're in a setting where there's no music and there's somebody who's conducting you, you know. So the thing for me is to be as clear as possible, and to be as open as possible. See, now this is a whole other thing. The conductor, for me, is a conduit. You know, when even in the book, Butch is talking about conduction. He's talking about conduction in the sense of conducting music, but also being a conduit, actually channeling energy. You're channeling energy. When you're a conductor in front of an audience, you're channeling. So what that means for me, for me is that every time I get in front of the orchestra or ensemble, I have to purify myself, you know, and it might take 2 minutes and it might take 2 hours. Before I go and I do it, I have to completely clean myself out. Psychically, psychologically, spiritually, I have to be, because I'm a channel. I'm a channel for, this stuff is coming from, you know, this is not just me trying to do something. It's not just me trying to do, this is coming from a high, you know, so, and then this is coming from the musicians too. So you have this energy that's coming from here, but then it's also coming from here. So you have this move, this like, and then the conductor is just there. He's just this vertical being with a baton or without a baton. I like to conduct with a baton. I like the baton because the baton, you can be more precise. With the graphic stuff, you can be very precise, or with pop, you can be very precise. So I like working with a baton. You can do a lot of things without a baton. I mean, a lot of the gestures don't have, the hold a note or down or up, or, you know, hold space, or, this is with the hand, but the baton is giving you the downbeat and the upbeat is as important as the downbeat is. You know, the upbeat, if you don't see the upbeat, then the downbeat might not be together. So the upbeat is very important. So all these things, and, you know, these are all things I learned from Butch, and learned from, you know, Butch and I and Adam and I, we talked a lot about conductors in classical music. I mean, which classical conductors we like. You know, I'm a big fan of Valery Gergiev, and he conducts without a baton. You know, I've seen him conduct with no baton, you know, but I have books on conducting that I got from Butch, and I have notes that he wrote in the book. And, you know, he was very much he studied conducting. He studied with Lucas Foss. And the idea for the conduction he got from Horace Tapscott and Lucas Foss, and also being around Gil Evans. Those were the people he was checking out, you know. So, you know, there is a lineage, you know. Leonard Bernstein, you know, you can find this on YouTube. Leonard Bernstein did a conducted improvisation with New York Philharmonic, but see, Leonard Bernstein and Lucas Foss had been talking about this, you know, conducting an orchestra.
Pluto.
Pluto,
I think it's called Pluto. Pluto.
Yeah. So, you know, there's a lineage, but then there's also another lineage that comes from comes from James Brown, comes from Sun Ra, it comes from, you know, there was another great conductor percussionist from Africa, from Senegal, named Doudou Ndiaye Rose. Doudou Ndiaye Rose was conducting improvisation and was very precise, man. And it was like 100 percussionists, and they were all his sons. Doudou was a heavy guy, man. I saw him conduct a couple of times. It was all percussion and dance, but it was like he conducted like it was almost it was heavy, man. You can find stuff on YouTube on him too. And one of his sons is living in Brazil, in Salvador. It's Doudou Ndiaye Rose Jr. He's a percussionist. He lives in Salvador. One of his kids.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Well, those are great ideas, Graham. I even don't know what to say, but I would like to come back to channeling. You were talking about, you know, channeling and cleansing yourself, and I would like to know if do you have a strategy for cleaning yourself before the gig or something like that?
Well, the main thing is I need to be quiet for a while. I need to be quiet in a quiet space. Sometimes I can do it in a noisy place, but I have to myself be quiet for a certain amount of time. It can be 5 minutes. It can be 2 minutes. It can be 20 seconds, but I have to do it. That's my preparation. You know, I have to I have to have that quiet. And see, that's not only for conducting, that's for improvising, but I find that I really have to deliberately do it in the conduction before conduction, because I don't want too many things, and then I don't want to do too many things that I rehearsed myself. See, I always have to, as I said, the best way I think to do the conduction, to learn the conduction, is by doing it. But then you have to have opportunities to do it. Otherwise, otherwise you're with books and you're with notes and you're trying to learn and trying to retain these things. And so I do that too. You know, I have my notes about the gestures and what I want to do, what I want to accomplish, and then one of the purposes of doing the cleanse is to get rid of all of that, because you have to forget that. You know, you can't get in front of the ensemble with 10 preconceived ideas. You can do it, you know, and it's been done, and I've done it. But the idea is to be more in touch with the other thing, so that those preparations are somewhere back here somewhere, and you can call on them, but they're not in the foreground, they're in the background, you know, of your mind, you know. So that's what I would say, you know. Yeah, I mean, the cleansing thing, that's mandatory for me. That's mandatory. I have to do that. I have to do it before each conduction. I need so many minutes of solitude, then I can, you know.
And because you have participated in all those great performances, and also you did have your own experience of conducting, you have a lot to share, and that's great, man. And I was wondering if within your experience, did you ever had experienced frustration on stage, or, you know, a feeling that something was going wrong or something that wasn't working? Can you remember?
Yeah, that happens, but yeah, I've had that several times. But when that happens, I mean, when you're in a concert in real time, you can't let that. You almost kind of, it's like it would be like playing in an orchestra with written music, and you play a wrong note. Okay, you played a wrong note. Now you have to get right back. You have to get back to your place. Just because you played a wrong note, you missed the note. We're in real time here. We're creating something, and, you know, at the end of the day, the audience don't really care that something didn't go the way you wanted it to go, you know. But yeah, I have experiences of things that don't go. I won't say right, because right is relative. Right and wrong is relative, but they don't go as I had planned, and I have to deal with that, and I have to recover. The main thing is the recovery. A boxer in a boxing match can get hit. You can take a hit, but it's about how you recover. You know, how do you recover from it?
Well, in opposite to that, I mean, do you think that is there any secret sauce or pearl or something that put the fire on in the ensemble? You know, do you think there is something, that a strategy maybe, that make the performance nice and interesting? Do you think there is something like that?
Not really. There is no one specific thing. Obviously, like I said, you have to be prepared as a conductor, and then, you know, I place a lot of emphasis on also on orchestration, you know, and that's something that Butch and I talked about a lot, and he was and that was the other thing, that's a whole other conversation, is orchestration.
Okay.
Because Butch also studied orchestration. And he talked a lot about people that influenced him. We talked a lot about Gil Evans. And right now I'm actually reading a book on Gil Evans. He's had a very, very creative sense of orchestration. And he did a lot of experimentation with his ensembles. So that's something that I always, in a conduction, I'm always trying to experiment with orchestration.
Okay.
What's the sound of the bass clarinet playing in the top register and the trumpet playing in the register of the trombone and with a mute? You know, I mean, you know, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of ideas and combinations that are possible, you know. So in terms of going back to your question, what is the secret? I think the secret, as far as I'm concerned, the secret always goes back to being a clear vessel, doing the clarity thing, the channel, and be in the moment, and don't be afraid, you know. Don't be afraid. Sometimes I have to block the audience out because sometimes I get nervous, but sometimes a little bit of being nervous is good. You know, sometimes you want to use that energy. Sometimes, you know, obviously, if you're conducting an ensemble and there's 10 people in the audience versus you're conducting an ensemble and there's 1,000 people in the audience, that's going to change what you do as a conductor. Okay. But you can't be afraid of the audience either. If I think too much about the audience, I'm going to be, and the same for the ensemble too. The ensemble, it's good to be a little bit nervous, but if you're so fearful about the audience, that you're not following the conductor, and that's happened to me. And I would say, okay, going back to you asking me about things that go wrong, those things are things that I don't particularly like in a performance. Is when the ensemble is not following the conductor, or he's distracted, or he's fearful because of some external, the audience, what critics came, or something like that. That kind of is a little bit nerve-wracking for me. But I'll tell you something, man. I had the last conduction I did. I had a guy who came in. He was completely drunk. He was drunk. I had one guy in the orchestra. He was completely gone, man. And I was doing stuff. I was giving, and I didn't know it. You know, obviously, if I knew it right before we played, I would say, look, like, you sit out on this one. But I didn't know. I didn't know until we started, you know. I didn't know until a few minutes after we started. So then this guy was not following me for the whole concert. He didn't follow hardly anything I did. And the other musicians were saying, man, what was up with that guy, man? What's that? You know, I had to keep going. You know, I kept conducting ensemble. I didn't let him get in the, you know, he didn't follow. As far as I was concerned, it was not a conduction, you know, it was not a huge success, but there were great things that happened, you know, but you know, I know how to circumnavigate around people that are not focusing, you know.
And what kind of strategy do you use to get people's attention when this happens?
Well, in that case, with that guy, I just had to give up. I just gave up. I've seen other conductors. I've seen Butch yelling at people in front of an audience, you know.
Shit.
But you know, but I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to go there, so I just ignored him. I just ignored him for the whole. And that's unfortunate, but that's how I dealt with it. That's how I dealt with it. I just ignored. I ignored.
I understand. It's crazy, man. Oh, um, well, I would like to ask you a last question about your creative process, because I know you already talked about the cleansing process, and you said about the orchestration that you like to use and develop this on your conductions. And I would like, if you don't mind, for talking a bit more about your creative process, about what kind of directives do you like to use the most, and you know what kind of construction you like to do when you are doing a conduction.
Well, it depends. It depends on the energy that I feel at the time. It depends also on the room. It depends on the sound of the room. The sound, the silence, the silence is very important. For me, silence is very, very, silence will determine how I think to start a conduction. What I hear in the room, which many times is nothing, it's silence, but that silence affects. But in any case, I'll start with one person, then I'll add another person, or I'll start with three people. And one of the things I like to do a lot, which I learned from Butch as well, is I like to use the orchestra against each other. So I have the orchestra, I have one section playing and another section and another, when they're all playing against each other, and then come back to a unison.
Okay.
Like you get so many memories. You get a memory one over here and a memory one over two over there and a memory three, and then you get them doing it, and then you go back to the original idea, or then I take them on, whatever the case. But I like a lot of contrast, and I also like playing. I like, one of my favorite gestures is the pan, because then you're using the room, the sound of when you go from one side to the other, but then I like a lot of things, but then you can't let these become cliches either. It's very easy to get into, oh, I like that, so I'm going to do that, but for me, it's always about challenging myself and challenging the ensemble to number one, to be in the moment, and number two, to try to go somewhere we haven't gone before, So,
yeah, that sounds cool, man. That's for sure.
That's very important, yeah.
Great, man. So I would say that if anyone has any questions, please drop in the comments, and we can start maybe with this question from Danielle Goldberg. Curious about Graham's concept of his electronics role in orchestration.
Electronics. As far as orchestration is concerned, electronics is it's interesting. When I first started working with Butch and playing with him in the ensemble, he wanted me to bring, he said, yeah, man, bring all your shit, bring your electronics. But then what happened was I found that in order to follow him, because then, so with Butch, I would play in the horn section. And then all the gestures that he wanted a particular group of horns to play, he would want me to play. But then if I was using electronics, that didn't always work, because with the precision, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to control. And it's also difficult to focus on two things at once. I mean, unless you have a lot of experience. So I'm looking at him. I have to follow him like it's split second precision, but then I'm over here, and then I'm also here. So I'm trying to deal with the electronics. So after a while, I found out it was best for me to work with him just to deal with the sections, because I wanted I wanted to focus on the conductor. But okay, going back to the electronics with orchestration, I would say that you know, I would love to do a conduction with only electronics, or I would love to do. I love electronics. You know, I mean, I love noise, I love sound, I love all that stuff. So you know, but I also like it's nice to contrast acoustic instruments with electronic instruments, or electronic contrasts are nice, and you know, there's a lot of things. It's an open world. It's all open. You know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. And well, another thing that I would like to ask you is, I know you have a lot of stories to tell. You have a lot of experience with that, and I would like to you, if you don't mind, to share one story that you know you keep in your heart or something like that.
Oh, yeah. That's funny because you asked me and you say I have a lot, and right now I can't think of any.
Okay, so.
But you know, yeah, I played in some. You know, I mean, for me, the whole thing about all of this in conducted improvisation and all this is I'm looking at somebody's question asking me about McFerrin, so I'd like to answer that question. Actually,
okay, yeah.
The reality is I'm not so familiar with Bobby McFerrin, with what he's doing with conducted improvisation, but I'm curious, so I would like to see. But you know, what I was gonna say to you is that it's about magic. This is magic. It's about trying to harness magic. You know, we don't know what sounds we're gonna make. We don't know what chords we're gonna get. If I get 5 people and I give them the signal for to play a note, we don't know what it's gonna be. And see, that's gonna determine what we do next, or what happened before might determine what happens now. It's really, you know, there's so many things. I mean, we're composing in real time. It's you know, it's about magic. You know, this is about, to a degree, there's many things that we cannot articulate about these things, you know, and in the end, it's just, you just have to do it, and people just have to see it. And people, you know, people always come to me and say they've never seen anything like that, they've never heard anything like that. You know, that's the power of, you know, this energy, you know, this energy, the universe. I mean, you know, it's when everybody is in tune with it, then yeah, there's going to be things that are completely spontaneously like magical, you know. So those are the things. Of course, there's going to be a lot of things, a lot of it's trial and error. You're going to do a lot of stuff that you did before. You're going to use a lot of the same signs you used before, gestures, and you know, repetition is good too. That's how you learn. Repetition is very good, but the idea is to try to find the magic, but don't force the magic. You cannot force magic to happen. You know? You can't force it. You know, it comes when it wants to come. You can prepare, you can cleanse yourself to be open, and then the rest is up to whatever, you know. You don't know what's going to happen. You're not in control, and but you control what you can control. You know, the rest you leave.
I love that, man. Yeah, that's outstanding. Yeah, great thoughts. Awesome. I totally agree. Totally agree. So, do you usually interact with the audience when you conduct?
Do I interact with the audience?
Yeah.
As of now, no, I haven't. I might in the future.
Okay.
You know.
It is very fun to do it. I've done once.
Have you done?
And yeah, I've done with the London Improviser Orchestra. It was very nice. Yeah, very nice.
What is? I don't know this London. Well, we'll talk later. I don't know this.
Yeah.
But I know. I remember once Butch went to London for a while to conduct an orchestra. I wonder if that's the same group. Maybe not.
I think I might be wrong, but I think they started with Butch, and then they developed their own system. They've been doing that for 20 years now.
Yeah,
It's very
okay.
yeah.
That makes sense because it was about 20 years ago when Butch went over. Okay, now wow,
Yeah,
that's beautiful.
yeah.
Then you know the sad thing for me about Butch was that Butch needed to have an ensemble. Butch should have been, as far as I'm concerned, he should have been given an ensemble to work with and given a stipend to work. And he should have had that, and he didn't. I mean, in spite of it, he managed to make a lot of work and do a lot of conductions. But it wasn't until he got sick that he got a contract to conduct an orchestra. You know, to do residency with an orchestra, like under contract. And you know, that's a little bit sad. But he made beautiful music, and he did amazing conductions, and they all got, a lot of them got recorded, and so we can always find the recordings and the YouTube and stuff. But the conduction is something that really, it should be explored more. I'm really happy to see so many people doing it, but the best way to do it is to do it in real time. You know, that's the best way to do it, to have an orchestra. If you can have a group of people that you work with over a period of time, there's nothing beats that. That's the ultimate. That's the ultimate, that you can be able to do that. And it's not easy to do. Where I live here in New York, that's not easy. That's not easy.
Yeah.
To find a group of guys that are commit to, or guys and girls that are going to commit to doing something every week or every month or that's very, I mean, the New Blue Orchestra, we did it. That it was a struggle, but we did it. And those guys were committed. Those guys were and are committed, because, you know, if Elon calls tomorrow and says, look, let's do this, you know, a lot of those guys will commit to do it. And if I can be there, I'll be there. But it's not easy.
Yeah.
It's not easy to do it.
Yeah, man, but it's beautiful that this happened, and well, it's nice to hear that. I like to hear that, you know, Butch's words were spread, and many people are exploring that. I think this is a legacy, and definitely I believe that he contributed for the evolution of music, of world music. And well, it's very, very blissful to see that.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
The idea of conducted improvisation is, to me, it's an open world. It's an open world. We've done, I won't say we've exhausted notation. I personally myself love working with notation. And I like working notation in tandem with conduction and conducted improvisation. But the conducted
New York is a fire.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. But New York, conducted improvisation is an open world that there's a lot of room for exploration. There's a lot, really, so many things that could be done. You know, there's so many possibilities, and so completely open. It's an open field. It's an open space. It's a new frontier. You know, it's a new frontier.
It definitely is. Yeah, it definitely is, man. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing. You have one last a quick question here from Daniel Goldberg. Any fun electronics you can recommend to check out as a horn player trying to explore that realm?
Well, man, I'm probably the wrong person to ask, because there are people that are working with stuff that's very advanced. I need to, I'm always thinking about updating the gear that I use, but I'm working with an iPad, and I'm working with a few apps. I'm working with, maybe we should, maybe I can get info and we can talk about that later, because I have to go and research what it is I'm working with. But
yeah,
the electronic, I like the iPad. I mean, I started working with an iPad by default because I was working with hardware. In the old days, I had big racks. And I was going to Europe with a bunch of stack of stuff, and that just became impossible. So now we're working with computers and iPads, and there are many apps that are really interesting, but there are people developing new stuff all the time. I mean, and I'm curious about all of it. There's new stuff. There's also things you can do. There are things you can do with feedback, feedback loops. I mean, I love working with feedback loops. And, there was a period of time I was just get on stage and just make a feedback loop, and just, that was the gig, But, there are many things. Yeah.
Awesome. So one last question. Can you recommend some performance on YouTube that you enjoy the most?
A conducted improvisation, conduction, or?
Yeah, I think so.
I can't, because I haven't looked at that many. I haven't looked at that.
Okay.
I can't. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I haven't. I'm open to see. I'm open to see, but I'm a big fan of live. It's nice to look at stuff, but I like to be there. So I'm always more intrigued by being at a concert live. But yeah, YouTube is great. Recorded stuff is great. Let me before you leave.
Yeah.
I see there's certain questions that you're asking everybody, and there's one question you didn't ask me, but I'm going to answer it anyway. And that's about the studio versus working with the studio, trying to retain a pure recording versus working with. Okay, so your question was. Well, why don't you ask the question and then I'll answer.
All right. So my question was about the recording. If you believe in a faithful recording of what just happened when you were recording a conducted improvisation, or do you believe it can be modified, edited, overdubbed, and to create a final product different from what happened on studio?
Okay, there I would say it depends. It depends on the conduction. It depends on what. It depends. However, my ideas about how to work with the studio come from. I come from the George Martin school of the recording studio. It's like you can do anything in the studio. You can use all kinds of effects and all kinds of overdub and edit. You can use anything, For me, the studio is an instrument to be worked with. But if I, obviously, if I compose a string quartet that's through composed, I'm not going to do any overdub,
Yeah,
so,
sure.
So now for conducting improvisation, it depends on the intent of that improvisation. It depends on the intent of that conductor. We might go into the studio with the idea that I'm going to manipulate it, But I haven't as yet recorded improvisation. I haven't as yet recorded a studio. So
I see, man.
Either way, I'm cool either way. But generally, I like to manipulate the studio. I like to do all kinds of crazy stuff, man. I like effects, panning, all kinds of things. But that depends. I might write. I just want to.
That sounds awesome, man. So I hope when you come to Brazil, we're definitely gonna record something together here.
I'm looking
in
forward.
my studio. Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to it, man. I'm looking forward to all
man.
stuff.
So I would like to thank you so much for participating in that, for joining these talks, and thanks for sharing all those great stories and ideas. You're an awesome person, and I wish you all the best, man. Yeah.
Thank you, man. It's my pleasure. Thank you for everybody who joined in. I wanted to give a shout out to Alex. I don't know if Alex saw it. But man, you know, I'll tell you something now. We were talking about feedback loops, and that's what's happening now. There's a feedback loop. It's a tremendous.
All right, man.
I'll see you soon, man.
See you soon. Take care.
Be strong.
Be strong too, man. All the best.
Okay. Best to you too.
All right. Bye-bye, bro.